Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Creative Coding with the Cause. And we appreciate having you guys here today, definitely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through a little bit of the agenda, and then we'll get right into this panel discussion. I like to always say at the beginning of these sessions that you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and definitely we appreciate that. And definitely we could have been anywhere in the world as it's such an international audience, and some of our presenters and the people that you're going to meet today are from all over the world using Scratch as a tool in their classrooms. So we're really excited about that. First and foremost, let's talk about the agenda. So first, I'm going to do a little bit of a welcome of myself and then let the panelists introduce themselves. Then we'll have some initial comments from our panelists, some moderator curated questions for the panelists. And finally, we'll try to take some questions from the audience. That's our goal, to get some feedback from you guys before we have our closing remarks. So who am I? I'm Antoine. I'm going to be your moderator. I'm the Associate Director for Mathematics and Computer Science at Rice University's Office of STEM Engagement. That's in Houston, Texas. Also, I'm a Computer Science Professional Development Specialist with the Expanding Pathways in Computing Group at the Texas Advanced Computing Center. That's at the University of Texas at Austin. And in that role, I'm afforded the opportunity to be the project director for the Computing Educator Diversity Initiative. So if I want to talk about diversity a lot, and I want to talk about expanding that pipeline and inclusion, well, you're going to get a healthy dose of that, questions geared in that direction. And finally, something that I'm actually also very proud of is that I'm the vice president of the Computer Science Teachers Association here in the greater Houston area. So, that's crazy. We have some clapping right there. I'm like, I missed you, Michelle, at the conference. I saw we were both presenting, putting pictures up, didn't see each other, but but that's the thing. So hopefully we still build a community. So some of my personal teaching ethos, some things I really like to talk about and really consider. I'm really considerate about these things in the classroom, and it's with my students. I want to make sure that I consider three questions: who do they see, how do they learn, and why do they care? And that idea of who do they see is like what kind of role models are they seeing in their classroom? What kind of tools are we putting out there? What kind of materials are we using? How do they learn? Are we being intentional about being responsive, specifically culturally responsive in our classes? And why do we care? Are our students motivated because we're making these lessons and activities relevant? And I think that the group that we have here is really doing an awesome job of adding relevancy and using Scratch as a tool to reach out to a lot of students who aren't traditionally represented. So as we get into this, I'm in this Scratch community because last year I was asked to do something very similar. I presented on Scratch across the curriculum. So I was able to speak with some cool people at Scratch who they found some lessons I had done, and they were like, come talk about them. But Scratch is a tool not only to do cross-curricular things, but also to add inclusion. And we'll talk, like I said, a lot about that. So we encourage you guys to share any kind of ideas and projects. You can share it via social media. We're going to make sure we give you our social media tags at the end of the session, or maybe if we want to say them at the beginning, that's fine as well. And you feel free to use the chat in Swamp Card. So we'll be monitoring what's going on in Swamp Card as well. So use the Q&A features, and I'm definitely invite questions. Give us some questions. We want to hear what you guys want to know about, and we'll definitely address that here. The name of our session, once again, is Creative Coding with a Cause. And we're going to lean in on one of those words, with the cause, right? And really think about that. What's the cause of this? Like, why are we doing this? So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead on and let our panelists introduce themselves. So we're going to go from left to right. And I'm going to start with the illustrious Coach Victor Hicks.
Hello, everybody. My name is Coach Hicks. Victor is my real grown-up name when I'm not with my amazing students. I am the proud founder and director of Coding with Culture, which is a program that aims to create a kindergarten through HBCU pathway in computer science and STEM. I'm a fellow CSTA chapter leader, proud secretary of the CSTA Georgia chapter, and a recently elected board member with the Decatur Makers, a really, really cool nonprofit makerspace here in Atlanta as well. So happy to be here. Happy to share how we use coding with Scratch to really create some impactful and creative things that I've been able to do in my classroom. So happy to be here.
All right, awesome. Next up, I'm going to slide over Jean Marie for a second. I'll come back to that, come back to Jean Marie in a second, and I'll let you know why. But next, I'm going to let Claudia introduce herself.
Hello, good morning. I'm so happy to be here with you today, ready to learn and share. My name is Claudia Perfecto. I'm from San Luis Potosí, Mexico. I am a coding teacher at Instituto Lomas del Real. I teach elementary and high school students, girls and young ladies. I am a computer engineer who decided to become a teacher, a technology teacher. So I had to be more prepared, and I got a master's degree in education. I am a certified Google trainer too. And well, I'm actually a tech coach there in my school, supporting teachers in all areas about technology. I like to collaborate in any way I can empower teachers and students, especially girls, using technology and STEM. And well, I have participated in Scratch Pals with my younger students, and I have participated in Girls Design with Code Latina edition in last February as a facilitator using the microbit and MakeCode. So very happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, Claudia. And last but not least, or I guess third but not last on the screen but not least, we have Michelle Swensson.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Swensson. I'm actually an instructional technology coach for LAUSD. And fresh from CSTA, Alan, I was in the back and I was getting so many ideas from you being one of the panelists. And you just couldn't see me because there's so many people in that room. And Coach Hicks, actually a fan of yours. You were actually mentioned at one of the keynotes, so I was there. And of course, Claudia, actually, I knew her before this conference because we actually connected our classrooms together to do Scratch projects for our classrooms, and we got to join our students. So it's great being here and so honored to be a part of this panel as well. A little bit about what I do at LAUSD. I'm basically a coach to basically support and model classroom lessons that integrate CS. And I do that for K through 12 schools. And most recently, I've been working with a elementary school. And this year, I'm going to transition to going into the school site to support just my school. I'm looking forward to this a lot and just looking for ways to connect to all of you. And hopefully my students can learn and benefit from all of your students as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Michelle. And like I said, Jean Marie is actually not with us in real time because he's on the other side of the world, and he was actually submitted a lot of his answers for some of the panel questions. But definitely we're gonna give you all of his information and hope for you guys to connect with him in that way. But like I did say, he did submit some of his answers, so let's go ahead on and let Jean Marie introduce herself.
Hello, Scratch community. I'm thrilled to be joining this year's Scratch conference from Nairobi, Kenya, as a panelist. My name is Jean-Marie Ishimwe. I am a Scratch teacher in the School of Intercultural Computing, previously known as the Nairobi Project. In the past, I've taught Scratch to refugees and locals. I did the intercultural competence and game programming. And I've also been on the forefront to support teachers with their professional development, particularly the issues around self-caring. Also, the partnership leader of a refugee-led organization known as the Voices Community, and work with advocacy for refugees and supporting education for vulnerable marginalized communities and refugees. I'm also a refugee advocate and journalist with Nawezaa Media, which is a media platform that seeks to support the engagement and collaboration of existing refugees and locals in Kenya and the globe. Thank you very much for having me this year's Scratch conference. Thank you.
I mean, I've never met him in real life, but I feel like I know him based upon these answers. And he's got one of my favorite quotes, one of my two favorite quotes in the background. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced, by the illustrious James Baldwin. So love it. And I'm happy to have his input, even if it's via video for these for our session. But with that being said, I know that our other panelists aren't able to see Swamp Card as I am in real time, but we have people saying they're chiming in from your local communities, saying I'm from Mexico, I'm from California, I'm from CST in Houston, I'm from Georgia, but also I'm from Argentina, I'm from Sri Lanka, I'm from Denmark, I'm from Ireland. So it's a wide array of people who are here today. So hopefully we're able to do that, to give you guys some good things to take away. And in the chat on Swamp Card, I've dropped all of our Twitter handles as well. So once again, if something resonates with you guys, feel free to tweet it out and let us know how you are enjoying the session. But with that being said, I'm going to start with a first question that I think that I'm interested to know everyone's definition of this. What's your definition of coding with a cause? The name of our session is Creative Coding with a Cause. So I'm interested in your definition of coding with a cause. And I'm going to start with Jean Marie, then I want everyone else to chime in there.
What is coding? Coding with a cause, in my opinion, is the use of computer programs or applications that help people to creatively create programmable products or games or instructions that help to deal with a certain issue. In this case, a very good example is Scratch. Scratch as an application has very resourceful to so many teachers and students across the globe. They're able to represent the issues that they face in their community in creating games or creating these narratives through Scratch. So coding with the course is essentially being able to use these applications to create, to find impact and to find solutions through coding, through instructions, through very meaningful instructions that show the issues and find solutions to those issues.
Okay, absolutely. And as I'm looking at it, feel free to chime in on this question on the chat. I see people already chiming in, but I'm going to pass that along to Claudia. What is your definition of coding with a cause?
Okay, coding with a cause is like to find solutions to the real problems we have in the world. In every context, our children have problems even at home that they can solve. To let them to be creative, to develop skills, to solve these problems in the world, and they have a lot of ideas when they create something, and we can make to create the possibilities for them to start creating with a cause.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Michelle, do you want to add to that that idea of coding with a cause? What are your thoughts?
For me, I think coding with a cause, very similar to the responses so far, is giving them a purpose and a reason to create with code. And so I think having our students just becoming almost like change agents, and coding is the tool that they use to create solutions to those problems, and allowing our students to really have like the audience in mind and the purpose in mind, and not just not only for, and it is for like our own pleasure and our interest and our passion, but really making a connection to their local and global community is coding for a cause for me.
Absolutely. And Victor?
Well, I think for me, the coding with the cause kind of gives you the why in those meaningful project-based learning experiences. One of the biggest things we do with coding with culture is being intentional about giving kids, and as I think Michelle mentioned, connecting to or finding purpose in these solutions that they're creating, which make those STEM experiences, more rich and more beneficial. So I think with the coding, of course, is the vehicle that or the tool that they use to create or to advertise or communicate these solutions to these problems. So I think it's really just giving them the that empathy piece. One of the things why I love teaching the design thinking process, in addition to the engineering design process, is because I think, our world could definitely use a lot more people who are operating with the good of others, or the improvement of conditions or things for others, or advancement of others. So when you combine that with the versatility of Scratch,
So it was storming in Georgia this morning. I heard it was storming in Georgia. So hopefully, Victor, the Georgia storm just caught you. You froze up for a second.
Okay. Am I back in?
You're back in.
Okay. All right. We're gonna come on. We're gonna get. I'm praying Atlanta just holds off a few more minutes. But all that to say, yeah. So that the coding, those definitely them getting those hard skills that they'll be able to use, but also that they're doing and learning that while developing a empathetic heart and mindset for others. So,
all right, thank you, Coach. As I'm looking, I'm once again, I'm going to say it again. I'm looking at the chat, and everyone's chiming in on their ideas, and there's a lot of diverse ideas here talking about just student motivation and giving students purpose and relevancy. It's a lot of big ideas and good ideas. I'm like, I wish we could have a panel with everybody. This was more of a roundtable discussion, so we could hear people are throwing different projects out there. So as you're listening to us, please look at the chat as well, because this it's worthwhile conversations that are happening in real time in that space as well. So thank you very much. And coding with the cause, I like that. But to get students that we want in our classes, and we'll delve into that a little bit more. We want to have a diverse pipeline of students in coding and having these abilities. They have to be motivated to learn, and motivated students perform better in our classroom. And honestly, student motivation is often tied to opportunities to be creative, right? So the question that I'm going to pose to you next is, what are some ways that you've used Scratch as a tool to add student creativity to your schools and districts? Because this is a Scratch conference, and I know you guys have used Scratch to do some of these things. I saw some awesome PBLs using Scratch that Michelle, you were working on with some. I've done my homework. You guys are out here doing the work. So let me go ahead on. I'm going to let Jean Maurice give his response first, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Michelle, to talk about some of these ways you use Scratch to add student creativity. All right. So why Scratch? I think I have two answers for him, but I'll go one at the beginning and one at the end.
I think, in my opinion, Scratch has been very instrumental to many teachers and students to involve themselves in coding and code for performance. And I think early enough, we need to introduce Scratch and any other very fun program to schools as early as the kindergartens, because what we know is that students are easy to learn when they're younger. So introduce such programs, it's very important for students to be able to think about creativity through programming. I think also when you look at it, it's a fact that when we are living in a technological world, that possibly there's new things coming in, there's AI and all these things. I think in the basics, programming should be taught in any school, because we can't continue to be teaching people basic things, but it's things like programming or coding that is more important to finding creative ways of solving certain issues. I'm always referring to solving issues because that's more what we decided to use Scratch for in my community, to create and code games, code narratives, code stories, code ideas that shows what we want our community, and essentially that's what would be table for programming and Scratch introduced as early as in the kindergartens. It's very important, since Scratch is also fun. It's fun to create, it's fun to learn by creating and all these things. So learning by creating, having fun to create, teamwork in itself, the easier way of coding, like it's really seamless to code to Scratch and all these things. So very much I think that's what we need, and the solution we taught should be given this chance to learn code. But thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so obviously I had a little bit of a drop off here. I'm trying to pull this tab back up. My apologies. I was trying to multitask it and work both of them at the same thing. So let me maximize, zoom that window, bring it back up. But yes, in the interim, Michelle, you can go ahead on and answer that question. It is the same
Sure.
question that we paused. I guess we don't need the slides in the background for that because it's basically just doing that. So the question is, once again, what are some ways that you've used Scratch as a tool to add student creativity to your schools and districts?
So for me, my students, when we start coding with Scratch, it's really hard to get them to stop. And so they love Scratch. So it's like instant engagement. And I believe that our students love Scratch because it really helps them maximize and realize their creativity. And so the whole idea of low floors, high ceilings, wide walls, just giving them that open-endedness to be creative really allows our students to be able to go and like put in their own interests, passions, and be able to create all kinds of solutions. I'll just kind of share my top 3 projects that, you know, are the most memorable for me right now. And the first one is when we kind of started physical computing aspect with Scratch. So using making circuit boards, creating conductive buttons, and then having our Scratch coding to kind of share out information. So the first one was creating an interactive safety t-shirt. And so what we did with Coach Hicks, we use the design thinking process too. And so we had our teachers kind of become our clients. And so our students created these field trip t-shirts with conductive buttons so that they're like the safety t-shirts so that when they go on field trips, they created a panic button made with aluminum foil so that when they press it, the Scratch coding will go off to kind of, you can hear a siren so that they can actually say like, I need help or I'm lost. Another project was using upcycled materials for creating a therapy robot because they were kind of looking at the question of how do robots improve human lives? And so they said, you know, we saw the Big Hero 6 movie, we want to create a therapy robot. And so they created a therapy robot with conductive buttons that, you know, told a joke, played a song and an inspiration quote. And then they had their peers interact with it and kind of like tell us whether or not, you know, playing with the therapy robot actually improve their mood. And finally, the last and most recent one that we worked on was how do we make the world a better place for everyone? And so one of the project groups, they came up with the idea of creating a accessibility bag for younger students with selective mutism. And so what they did was create visual icons on a cardboard box with a little handle for a bag. And they basically coded little statements that would be frequently used for people. And so like, where's the bathroom or hello? And so they created this to be used for students with selective mutism. So with that said, those are just my top three, but there's so many ways it allows students to be creative that just give them Scratch and you just wait for them to come up with something. And it's just a great opportunity for teachers to see how amazing our students can be if you just give them the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, you just said 3, but I'm sure you got a bunch more because it sounds like, and I saw a lot of the student projects. So definitely feel free to y'all reach out to Michelle. She probably can give you a lot of good ideas as far as going forward with that. But yeah, Claudia, do you want to add some more? I mean, I definitely want some feedback from all of you guys. It's a big part of what we're doing. How are we using Scratch as a creativity tool?
Yes, as Michelle mentioned, I think that students need to fully engage in their learning. They will be more creative when they feel challenged or when they need to solve a problem by themselves. And if it is a problem they created or they saw in the community, as I mentioned at home, they are more involved in all the process. So they need to know that they can make mistakes and that while they are experimenting, yes, it's not a problem. They are going to win always. And if they work collaboratively with another children, with a team, they are more motivated to finish those projects. So in my case, my students work with another subjects to create collaborative projects, and they get a lot of engagement. They are always trying to finish the projects, adding things. They want to make games to solve that problem, etc. Scratch has no limits. and the imagination of our children can be boom. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Claudia. And Coach, what do you have for that one? What are some ways that you use Scratch?
Well, one of the things I think that stands out the most is part of our project-based unit. So again, Coding with Culture is about all things HBCUs, which are historically Black colleges and universities, as not only content, but also in one of the things we're very intentional about is giving students or introducing students to these institutions, so they also understand this is a pathway for them to reach and to help diversify the STEM and CS world. So with that being said, one of the things they do is one of our project-based learning units is they step into the shoes of a brand new HBCU president. And the question that they're posed with, or their big question, is that they have to create these campuses and various ways of advertising and displaying. So there's 3D modeling, but the Scratch piece that I love the most is one of the first parts. They create a virtual campus tour with Scratch. So in my computer science instruction, one thing that I loved is that there were so many tutorial-based things to kind of teach the skills. So the kids could learn loops and events and conditionals. But the thing I love about Scratch is that it provides that open sandbox where the tools are easily accessible and understood by learners of all ages. But it gives them the autonomy to really use their strengths and really kind of show what they know and what they've gotten from some of the direct instruction that we do around those computer science concepts. But the things that I've seen, I mean, the kids have written, school songs, coded those into their campuses, actually, took or made recreations using, or painting or editing some of the backgrounds and the sprites in Scratch to mirror some of the things that they learned, as they researched HBCUs in this as one of the steps of creating their own. So I love the fact that Scratch allows kids, even in those larger units, to create the artifacts along the way. So there's, and then once the kids do that, as a kind of a teacher guided piece of our PBL unit, it's interesting to see how many, and again, some of the ways they've incorporated, physical computing, some of those with the makeys, and there's just so many different interactions. And the way the kids have taken once I kind of give them that little nugget in the beginning where we kind of walk through creating this event-based, program, once they kind of get to the end stages of that unit, the creativity, and I think, like I said, the independence is what I love the most, the independence and that creativity. So yeah, so many examples. So
yeah, and I think that it's interesting. We could all probably give an hour-long talk on these particular ideas. So, and I'd be remiss if I did not mention this chat again that you guys are missing. There are so many outstanding ideas and people sharing activities and lessons and giving you guys kudos for what you're saying, but also talking about other things that they're doing that are in similar veins, similar opportunities there as well. Just be familiar as you're putting things in the chat. If you have any questions that you may want us to answer at the end, we're about at the halfway point. I want to leave at least a good 5 to 10 minutes at the end to answer some questions from you guys. Please put it in the questions tab so it's a little bit easier for us to see as opposed to the chat, because it'll get kind of lost in that all of the robust feedback that we're getting in the chat. As I stated before, I was going to let Jean Marie bookend our talk about that particular question and give his thoughts on motivation for creativity.
How do you get students to be motivated to be in class or to be creating in class? I think as a teacher, I often constantly thinking about the motivation of any student. I want students who feel empowered, feel that they are within a very safe space of learning and a playful and fun way of learning. And I think those are very motivating students to be in class and to be happy to learn. But I think when I look at these questions, I think we need to think about them in two ways, particularly for me when I was training, I was thinking about them in this way. So one, it's essentially like when students do something or find issues when they're learning and they're able to solve those issues themselves, it motivates them to learn. And this has been like during our game programming sessions, coding through Scratch. Often the students will find bugs in their games, like bugs essentially, things that make their games not work or their problems or the code is not one, and they're able to solve this particular code, which in this case is a bug. And in fact, solving that particular bug ignites their creativity, ignites their willing spirit of being in that session. So that in particular was very instrumental, like just being able to solve any issue that they found in their games on Scratch. Was and in the codes on Scratch was very essential. As someone once said, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together and go in a team. So what I saw in my students that was a very big motivation for them working together. That it was an avenue for them to help each other learn, but also find creative ways of solving or doing whatever session game practice they were doing, or creating their games or thinking about the ideas. Teamwork really motivates and encourages the students to be motivated because they help each other. They are there as resource persons to each other, and that way they're able to basically get motivated to always and continuously be able to learn together.
All right, absolutely. So with that being said, let's kind of pivot just a bit, because I did say that I always, one of my major things is to talk a little bit about diversity and culture. And I'd be remiss if I didn't kind of bring it up in this context, because obviously student motivation, diversity, culture, they're all tied to basically a lot of these culturally responsive teaching techniques. And I guess one of my, I'm going to ask about the problem first, and then I'm going to ask you guys about the solution. I'm really going to only ask 2 questions. So first and foremost, how does encouraging creativity in your coding class add to diversity? And what are some major hurdles to bring computer science to students from underrepresented groups? And Victor, Coach Hicks, I'm coming to you first because, at CSTA, I heard a whole story about you and hurdles to bringing diversity to students from underrepresented groups. So I'm going to go ahead on and pass it to you to address that question.
Okay, yeah, I think one of the things, and I'm just going to be, Coach Hicks, so I'm going to keep it real here for our listening audience. I think intention, one of the biggest hurdles I find, and definitely speaking to my, some of the situations I've experienced personally, is the lack of genuine intention by those that are looking to provide these spaces. I think a lot of times it's very easy, and it can be kind of cringeworthy, because some of those buzzwords that are really meaningful if executed and really attended to, and with genuine and good purpose and good intent, are great, but they also are misused. And I think a lot of times not really bringing these robust or realistic experiences to students. So sometimes what I've found in diverse spaces where, and again, our primary audience that we've worked with have been students of African-American descent. So what happens is that, they bring in a teacher who's about, empowering these students and about, again, empowering all students, but making sure and being intentional about, reaching out and making these opportunities available for students that are not necessarily what we like to call at risk, but are not being given that voice. They're not being pushed to that sense of excellence. And I think sometimes that, I'll just be honest, it gets to be a little scary. And that's where sometimes that true intent of empowerment and things like that. So again, why are we teaching, about historically Black colleges to a school that's not a majority African-American? What is the necessity in that? And realizing that there's empowerment if we talk about wanting to diversify. And again, because again, we cannot ask these students to go and fill this, and as much as I hate the buzzwords, I'm using them, the gap, the digital divide that we talk about wanting to fill. Well, that takes courage, and that takes strength, and that takes confidence. So again, we have to be very intentional in these diverse spaces where there may be small populations of African-American students. Sometimes just having a teacher there that is unapologetically bringing their culture as a seat to the table is that missing piece that those students need. So yes, they need the instruction. They need to learn about loops and conditionals, but if they don't have the confidence and understanding the innate excellence, and the fact that, again, you're not always operating from less than, because you also have a piece of your culture is also as rich, and there's just as many people, or enough examples of people that look like you. And again, there's empowerment in that. So when someone is finally intentionally saying this to these kids in an environment where they're not the majority culture, however, that scares a lot of folks. And so like my my situation happened is that, yeah, but because this wasn't going to be just a brown face in a computer science classroom, and we're going to put the diversity sticker on that. No, we're going to be very intentional about, again, yes, the same sense and same expectation of excellence is there for all of my students, but you brought me here to do a job. So now allow me to do that, because again, no one's losing out in this situation. So I think one of the bigger challenges for me has been having the, and again, I'm turn up teen, and so when you tell me you want me to do this, I'm going to go full throttle for these kids. But unfortunately, that once that happens, that starts to scare a lot of people who, again, that intent was not as genuine as it appeared.
Yeah, I mean, you speaking of hurdles, I can speak to my own experiences a lot. I come up with and develop programs in and around in Texas, usually for trying to get students into learning about computer science. But oftentimes when the money comes in and it's like, okay, we want to be able to do this particular opportunity, it becomes a thing where it's, let's keep scaling this, but we're not thinking about the realistic concerns of individual students to get them involved in these pathways. So Absolutely. It's like you use the word that I'm big on, which is intentionality. You have to be intentional and kind of know the audience, know the students that we're trying to attract, and give them an opportunity to find their way into CS by giving them like low floor, high ceilings, wide walls activities.
Right. It's again, the intentionality behind the buzzwords, right? UDL is all about that. But I think we talk about even, one of the most disappointing things for me, when we talked about, being intentional about getting young women into computer science, that the solution was Barbie for everything, and I'm thinking to myself, there's such diversity in my female students. Sure. And the ones that have bought into code, I was just so surprised in their diversity of their light bulbs, right? That moment where they were like, okay, yes, CS is for me, or yes, I see myself using computational thinking. It definitely, I would say 99% of those young women, it wasn't the Barbie tutorial that did it. And I think that's the thing I love about Scratch, is that even we talk about culturally responsive, there's diversity in that. So my Black students in Chicago, there were cultural behaviors and pedagogies that I had to employ there that were totally different than my same socioeconomic group of African-American students that I teach here in Atlanta. So, I think that's the thing I love about that. There's creativity within creativity, diversity within diversity. So, we have to be intentional again. And that scares a lot of folks. They like that cookie cutter answer. Okay, teach them in 45 minutes, coach. Don't get them too excited. Don't, not too many questions. But we want to be able to say that 100% of our kids are coding. But if it's not intentional.
Yeah, and it's a big part about knowing your kids. I'm just going to leave it with this, that knowing your students allows you to teach directly to your first period and your fourth period might be different groups. Amen. Like, so giving them that ability to be able to have choice in what they're doing. I remember a couple of weeks ago, Kendrick Lamar made a music video where he was using machine learning algorithms to do deep fakes, like on video faces. And I was like, that's an awesome intro into a machine learning activity that I was doing with kids. Awesome. The machine learning for kids suite that Scratch provides, exceptional. If you guys aren't familiar with that, look into that. But the intro, I wanted to do a Kendrick Lamar thing. And the kids who I gave it to said, who's Kendrick Lamar? Because they are so much younger than me. I'm thinking that the kids would have related to these inner city kids would have said Kendrick Lamar, but they're like, no, I like NBA Youngboy. So you have to know who the kids are. Like, you have to really know your individual kids. But let me take a step back to go forward. One of the questions in the chat, I would wait till the end, but I think it's germane right now. Kate asked, she used the blurb from our session, in today's diverse classrooms, educators must embrace the cultural identity of the students they teach. She said, how do we use Scratch for culturally responsive teaching strategies? And I want to answer that. Then I want to pass it to Michelle, Claudia, if you're comfortable with that, because I want to talk about how some of the things that the success stories you're having with educating students of color and girls in CS classrooms. But I'll just say this, that some of the basic, before we even get 10 toes deep into it, the basic things in culturally responsive teaching strategies to make your class better are to gamify it, make games, make it social, and tell stories. Those three things are across the board for our most historically excluded groups in CS. Those are teaching strategies that tend to be ones that they respond to the best. Now, if you aren't telling stories, making games, and being collaborative using Scratch, then you're using Scratch wrong, because those are that is what Scratch is all about. And I think that is those are culturally responsive practices that Scratch uses all of the time. So Michelle, I'm going to pass it to you. I'm sorry, Claudia, I'm going to ask it to you. Pass it to you. What are your success stories for exposing, attracting, and educating students of color or girls in our CS classes?
Well, in my case, I'm teaching in a school for only girls. So it has been very motivating for me to see how little girls and high school girls can code and create lots of things. And best of all, to say, I can do it. It's not only because I am a woman, yes, or a girl, because here in Mexico or Latin America, we have most the idea that technology is for boys and not for girls. So it has been very, very motivating for me when they feel secure coding, programming, creating a web page, and a Scratch game. We are starting with little robots, so they are really fascinated. So in this case, that I have had the opportunity to participate in a program like Girls Design with Code, that it was held in February in several countries in Latin America, and I was a facilitator. I could see the interest of those girls, young girls from 10 to 14 years old, where they were very interested in learning about the microbit, for example. And they created a lot of things according to the unsustainable goals. And with my younger students, the little girls, we had the opportunity to participate, for example, in the Scratch Pulse, where I can see how they can create a lot of things, and they are really happy to say, this is my creation, it's my project, and I could do this, okay? So I think that a successful story in my case is to see my students motivated to continue learning about programming, coding, robotics. The ones that went to the university, some of them choose those careers. And it is really nice to see they are going to continue in this technological world, preparing themselves in these careers. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Claudia, and we definitely appreciate that, and it makes a bunch of sense. And I would pass this to Victor and Michelle, but you guys follow them on Twitter, and you can see the work that they're doing. Go to Coding with Culture. You'll see exactly the answer to that question about those successes that that Victor is definitely having in those attracting students of color and girls there, and the work that Michelle's doing. Go to her Twitter, see all of these kids, all of these diverse kids and young kids that are working through that. But with that being said, Michelle, I want to ask you that question because I'm going to try to be intentional about our time. I'm going to hopefully get in 3 more questions. How can we work to ensure earlier exposure to coding, like that cradle to career idea of getting them started earlier?
I think it has to be a collaborative effort, not only just within the schools, but your district, your community partners, and really shifting the thinking that computer science is just for secondary schools or for after school clubs or only for a certain group of students. And I think that's what needs to happen at the elementary level, because for students who don't have, in my experience, exposure to computer science education, especially, you know, as something as great as Scratch coding. A lot of times when our students go into like middle school and high school, our students of color, our girls, don't necessarily identify as someone who thinks they will be good or excel in a computer science industry, or even like consider that something that's relevant to them. So I think just giving them that opportunity and exposure and access very early on, I think will help increase the probability that more diverse students actually, you know, think about, you know, entering the CS field. And they don't really even need to be a computer scientist, but just knowing that the problem solving skills you learn through computer science education is something that can be carried throughout any kind of career or academic content area is something very beneficial and something that our district needs to kind of work on. Because as a teacher, we do so much and we can do so much for our school, but it needs to be something that's streamlined for all schools, I think. But some of the ways that our schools have, you know, tried to bring it within our school is we start with the students, just empowering the students, giving them the opportunities. And you can start small, like you can start a club and then just kind of branch out. And that's kind of what we did at Carson Street STEAM Academy. We started with a club and then we trained these club members into student leaders. And then the second step is really to kind of equip the teachers. And so having our student leaders lead teacher professional development really brought in our teachers to be like, hey, if my students can do this, I think I can do this too. And so that's how we kind of got buy-in from the teachers. And then once the teachers got comfortable, we were able to kind of integrate slowly the CS concept into their academic content, because what we really wanted wasn't just for the kids who can go to the after school program, but for all K-5 students during the school day, because honestly, if it's not during the school day, you're not giving that access to everyone. And so once that kind of happened, we invited district personnel, we invited community partners to open house, or when we're celebrating Computer Science Week. All this said, we did these things not only like, we didn't do this overnight. It took years, it took a lot of struggle and, you know, refining, and we're still kind of contemplating what we want our CS education to look like. But it needs to happen with the joint partnership of all our stakeholders, bringing in parents, educating them, have family code nights. It's just to see what this looks like in the elementary level and to see that this is something that needs to happen at a very young age.
So Michelle, we had a lot of kudos in the chat, and actually it's funny, is one person had just put encourage family coding parties, encouraging a connection to coding with our church. Like as soon, right before you said it, it was said in the chat. Another person said they utilize their older students on campus and camps as role models. They think it's cool, and sometimes they listen to them more. So so these ideas of, you know, making it important, or why is it important, or how can we ensure that they code a little earlier. And I'd be remiss if I didn't include Jean-Marie in the conversation, because it's been a while since we heard from him. So live and direct, we have.
In my opinion, I think particularly coding for papas, you look at it, it's very integral solutions, finding ways of reacting or solving the issues that students either face while learning or generally face in life, or we face in life, and the aspect of how you basically able to code, be able to give instructions to learn something, be able to learn about this intercultural competence or creative computing. I think it's just worth to say that it's only through coding that's easier.
All right, thank you very much for that input there as well, Victor. So next I'm going to ask this question. Well, I'm going to go to an audience question because it's got like a bunch of thumbs up on this question. So I'm thinking some people might want to get some feedback to this as well. And it comes from Aaron Rulin, and he said, I love what Claudia said about having students solve problems, perhaps even in their school, right? Individual problems for their community, their schools, things that are relevant for them. Do the panelists have experience or advice getting students comfortable speaking out about what they think of as problems they face or see around them? And I'm going to go ahead on and throw that to any one of the panelists who want to jump in and address that question.
I think it really just comes from that. I think, again, looking at the STEM and the PBL side of it, in which I've used Scratch, is that, you know, I've very intentional about setting that culture in my classroom amongst my coding with culture camps, that we're solving real world problems. And that part of that, you know, experience and benefit they'll get from that comes from the advocacy and, you know, and understanding that sometimes problem solving, you know, again, one of the soft skills they learn from coding is that resilience. You know, we talk about that when they're debugging and things, but also realizing that some of that same resilience as you're a part of those project teams. And again, I think that's the bigger picture when we talk about computational thinking and being a part of those 21st century real world experiences that make it helpful for kids. So I do encourage them to, you know, HBCUs at the springboard that I give them, so give them an example of what a project looks like. But then really putting the ball in their court and kind of saying, okay, so what are some things that you can, you know, that are important to you or important to you in your community? What are some problems? How do you think that we can use computational thinking or computer science to advocate or to push for that? And I think once you kind of get the students there, and again, it's part of it, and I think especially with the younger students, is really being intentional about what that advocacy looks like. So again, the coding is, I think, just a part of it, but it opens up the door to so many other rich experiences for students. So yes, I think it gives a very good real world teachable moment. When you teach kids that sometimes if you're really going to make a difference or really going to be, again, empathetic to help other people, sometimes that those conversations require a little bit of bravery and a little bit of, you know, resilience. Again, you learn that in computer science. I think it's kind of an interchangeable, those skills and those experiences are so interwoven, which is what makes it such a great experience for kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to give them you have to build a community that they feel safe
Right.
having these conversations as well. And I mean, the question also said, do you have any experiences? I mean, I don't know. And I think from what I've seen, you guys have. Michelle, Claudia, do you want to talk about any of those experiences on facing problems in their own communities? Go ahead, Michelle.
But we
Pick me.
we recently actually completed some project-based learning experiences with our students, and so it was like 3rd through 5th, and we started out with, like, you know, just kind of sharing out very like informal brainstorming of like, what are some problems that you see in your community? What are some things that you're passionate about? And so that kind of built there and kind of got their interest going. And then we started to learn about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so we kind of inspired them with a couple of video clips of how kids themselves are taking on some of these real world problems and are actually creating actual solutions for it. And then that kind of got them inspired. And then basically we started doing research about one of the topics that they were concerned with. And then once they did the research, and we did this all through like a process, design thinking process, and then that kind of helped them kind of guide their project-based learning kind of experience. They were able to create solutions using Scratch to kind of come up with a public service announcement. So if you want to know more about that, I do have that, you know, posted on my Twitter. But if you want to DM me, I can also explain it more in depth. But just giving students more of an open-ended way to approach things, and then giving them a process to go through the step-by-step really helps students to kind of like really speak to the project. And it's really not about the end product for me. It's really about the process that they go through, and they're able to kind of explain it and not just say, oh, it's an important problem, but actually connect it to a SDG and then come up with the research and the facts that go along with why they think it's a problem and how they would resolve that problem.
All right, thank you very much. For the sake of time, because we're looking at like about 4 minutes left, I want to just go ahead on and pivot to like the final question that I was going to ask, and I guess I can put us up on the screen for this. And if it looks like I'm spamming the chat with our Twitter information, I just don't know how easy it is for you to find us. And I mean, we love building a community and building a network. So every 15 minutes, I was dropping it in there just in case it got lost in the chat. Just so anybody wants to reach out to us, they have a really quick way to do so. But a question that I definitely want to leave you with, and if we don't use the whole time, we can definitely still have some audience feedback. Once we have this diversity in our CS courses, and once we start building this momentum of creativity, what teaching activity strategies can we use to keep these high levels of interest and relevance? So like, what do we do going forward to ensure that kids are still motivated to code creatively with a cause? I guess it's just next steps is what we're asking in that way. And Victor, go ahead on and you can go ahead on and start this one up for me.
I think for me, it's just really making sure that those experiences are, and again, as I'm such not I can just buzzwords keep coming to my head. It's so making sure, so while we're giving them the cultural relevance and the responsive pedagogy and content, making sure that they are getting the skills, so that if, computer science is something that they want to pursue in middle school, high school, into college and career, that they actually have the skills, right? Because I think the empowerment is one piece of it, but you have to be able to keep up with, as those challenges get bigger and bigger. But I think, again, I think with the equal combination of both, allowing students to see, because again, they have to be able to be confident enough to do it, but then we also want them to have the skills to be able to, to produce, if that is what they'd like to do. So I think just making sure that creating that community in those computer science spaces, in those, content area classrooms where computer science is being integrated. Would definitely love to see more of those. Because I think, like I said, one of the biggest enemies to genuine, robust computer science instruction is the special/connections piece, right? It's very easy to put it on that shelf and say, okay, well, 45 minutes a week. But to speak to Michelle's point about that early intervention, computer science is a language. We don't wait till fourth grade to teach kids to read. We don't teach kids to read for 45 minutes a week. When the computer science teacher is in school, it has to be taught, it has to be immersive, it has to be continual, and I think then that way we'll see kids develop that confidence, but also develop that content area knowledge. Well, they'll be able to keep going and creating those, those purposeful projects and solutions.
All right, Michelle, Claudia, we got less than a minute. Any last words that you want to leave the team with? You don't have to answer that particular question. You can just go ahead on some final words. Claudia, anything?
Well, to finish, only to say that to maintain our kids motivated with real things that they can solve by themselves, and it will give them more confidence in the classroom, and maybe to become more self-determined in all the things they do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Claudia. And Michelle?
For me, something that I'm going to actually apply, because I want to make sure that my students are always connected. I agree with Claudia, the real world aspect, the connection, and how they see themselves too, I think is really important. And so from CST, actually, I went to a session called Power On. And so it's about students and their thoughts and views about the equity and justice in computer science. And I think that's a really positive connection that I can make for my students, and that'll keep them hopefully engaging in the thinking and the conversations about CS.
And I'll just end with, give students an opportunity to be creative. Open those doors. You will be surprised with what they give you. Scratch is an amazing tool to allow kids to tell stories, right? To talk about their experiences. Don't be afraid to let them talk about their experiences, because once they do so, then you're going to be able to get some information from them that's going to allow you to teach relevant activities to them that they're going to really, really chime in on. So you guys have been an exceptional audience, and you guys have been an exceptional panel. I can't wait to do this again with you guys at some point. But with that being said, I think we're going to go ahead on and log off and stop. But before I do so, I will try to find, everybody keeps asking for the chat. I'm going to try to find some way to get this chat saved somewhere so we can get some of these good ideas captured in one place. But thank you guys very much.